Good afternoon and welcome. This is Spotlight Africa and we're coming to you live from Uyo, the Akwa Ibom State capital. Today on Spotlight Africa, junta leader Doumbouya cleared to run in Guinea's presidential election. United Nations urges Libya to shut migrant detention centers. Uganda president admits Kenyan activists were arrested and held in the fridge. Gabon court sentences former First Lady Sylvia's son Noordin to 20 years in prison for graft. In other news, United States calls for international action to cut weapon supply to Sudan paramilitaries. These stories are all just ahead on Spotlight Africa. Stay with us. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. We head straight now to Guinea, where the Supreme Court has released a provisional list for candidates for next month's presidential election. Among the 9 names listed, junta leader General Mamadi Doumbouya. He has been in power since 2021 when he ousted former President Alpha Condé after Condé sought and won a controversial third term in office. Former Prime Minister Lassana Kouyaté and former Government Minister Osman Karba have been barred from standing on technical grounds. Kouyaté has said he will appeal. Opposition leader Faya Milmono and former Minister Apolaye Yero have been cleared to run. Voters last month gave Doumbouya the go-ahead to stand in December's presidential race, a possible path for the coup leader to legitimize his military rule. Doumbouya had initially promised to give up power once Condé was overthrown. The credibility of the upcoming vote has already been called into question due to the exclusion of opposition voices. The military dissolved many of the country's political parties last year and suspended the 3 main opposition parties before last month's referendum. The election comes a year after the date agreed with the regional ECOWAS group to hold a vote, prompting opposition groups to boycott the national legislature. Guinea is one of a growing number of West African countries, including Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, where the military has taken over. In another development, United Nations countries, including Britain, Spain and Norway, Sierra Leone, have raised alarm over the treatment of migrants in Libya, a key transition point for Africans fleeing conflict and poverty toward Europe. Norway's ambassador urged Libya to end arbitrary detentions, and Britain called for UN investigators to have unrestricted access. Meanwhile, Libya's acting foreign minister Elatha Elabo acknowledged the country's struggles, but said Tripoli's UN-backed government is working to ensure human rights are respected during the fragile transition. He cited cooperation with the International Criminal Court and a new joint committee to oversee detention centers. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has for the first time acknowledged that two Kenyan activists who were missing in his country for 5 weeks had been arrested. Last month, eyewitnesses reported seeing Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyor being forced into a car by masked uniformed men after a political event where they were supporting Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine. News of their release was confirmed on Saturday, but up to that point, the authorities had denied that they were being detained. In a live interview on Saturday evening, Museveni described the two men as experts in riots who had then been put in the fridge for some days. The president, who has been in power for almost 4 decades and is running for another term in office, was responding to a question about the recent deadly youth-led protests in neighboring Tanzania. Museveni blamed foreign groups for stoking up trouble. Without naming them, he added that the two Kenyan activists were released after he received calls from some Kenyan leaders who said they should be handed back. Njagi and Oyo were welcomed by supporters at the main airport in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, on Saturday. Elsewhere, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Mahmoud Yusuf, has warned that the continent's debt crisis is undermining development. Speaking in Ethiopia at a G20 Africa high-level dialogue on debt sustainability, Yusuf said public debt has grown to about $1.8 trillion. This represents about 2/3 of the continent's GDP and is largely due to the high cost of borrowing and limited access to concessional finance. Yusuf noted that in 2024 alone, debt service payments exceeded $70 billion, consuming an increasing share of public revenues and eroding fiscal space. He added that these pressures highlight the need for urgent collective action to restore debt sustainability and improve Africa's access to capital on fairer terms. In Gabon, a court has sentenced the former First Lady and son of oil-rich country's deposed leader, Ali Bongo, to 20 years in prison following a 2-day graft trial. Sylvia Bongo, aged 62, and Noureddine Bongo, aged 33, both tried in absentia, were found guilty of embezzlement, among other charges. The wife of Ali Bongo, whose family allegedly ruled the Central African country with an iron fist for 55 years, had been accused of manipulating her husband to embezzle taxpayers' money. However, she denied all charges. In a separate development, South Sudan's leader Salva Kiir has dismissed one of his vice presidents, Benjamin Bolmel, who had been tipped as his possible successor. Kiir stripped Bolmel of his military rank of general and dismissed him from the National Security Service. He also sacked the central bank governor and the head of the Revenue Authority, both considered close allies of Bolmel. No explanation was given for the dismissals, which were announced in a decree broadcast on state television. It comes when there are growing fears of political instability and a possible return to civil war after the recent collapse of a fragile power-sharing agreement between Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar. Bolmel, 47, was appointed vice president in February, replacing James Wani Iga, a veteran politician and general. We head now to Egypt, where its top diplomat has met with Sudan's military leader in a renewed push to advance a ceasefire plan as the war-torn nation faces a catastrophic humanitarian situation following the paramilitary capture of a key Darfur city. Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati met with General Abdel Fattah Burhan in Port Sudan, reiterating Cairo's condemnation of atrocities in El Fasher and stressing the need to commit to the peace plan announced in September by a quartet including the US, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. The proposed plan envisions a 3-month humanitarian truce followed by a 9-month political process to resolve the conflict that has killed at least 40,000 people and displaced 12 million. Meanwhile, intense violence continues to tear apart Sudan after the fall of El Fasher, with new images from the city revealing the extent of its destruction, and the United Nations warning about the increasing number of displaced people in the country. Saudi Arabian state-owned TV channel Al Arabiya aired footage from this weekend of the damage in Al Fasher. The video shows the walls of buildings and a mosque inside a military medical facility bearing traces of heavy gunfire, while red tape indicates the presence of landmines. The medical military facility was near the 6th Army Division, where the main battle between the Rapid Support Forces and Sudanese Armed Forces took place before the fall of El Fasher. Al Arabiya reported that the RSF had accused the Sudanese army of using the facility as a military base during the war in El Fasher. In the meantime, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called for international action to cut off weapons supplies to Sudan's paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, following reports of mass killings in El Fasher. At the end of a G7 foreign ministers meeting in Canada, Rubio said the RSF had committed systematic atrocities, including murder, rape and sexual violence against civilians. Sudan's army accuses the United Arab Emirates of supporting the group with weapons and mercenaries sent via African nations. The UAE has repeatedly denied the allegations. The RSF has been fighting the Sudanese army since April 2023, when a power struggle between the leaders erupted into a civil war. 6 dead in Ghana's military recruitment stampede. Stay tuned for details of this and more in a moment. Welcome back and thanks for staying tuned. This is still Spotlight Africa. We head now to West Africa's Ghana, where a British man has died after being shot during a robbery in the nation. On Friday, Ashraf Kalma Pervez, 68, was shot after he tried to stop an attempt to steal his phone at a drinking spot in Tema, a city to the east of the Accra. He later died in hospital. Authorities in Ghana are searching for the shooter, one of a group of 6 suspects who they say were at the scene and fled on motorbikes. The UK Foreign Office said it was supporting the family of a man who had died. A 9mm spent bullet shell was recovered from the shooting site, and police have interviewed witnesses as part of the investigation. The incident has raised security concerns in the industrial city of Tema, But a local police spokesperson told reporters that the shooting was a rare incident. Meanwhile, it was a rare incident. Meanwhile, at least 6 people lost their lives after a stampede occurred during a military recruitment exercise at the El Wak Sports Stadium in Accra, Ghana. A statement signed by the Acting Director General of the Ghana Armed Forces Public Relations Directorate, Colonel Evelyn Asamo, that the incident resulted in the deaths of 6 potential recruits, while several others sustained injuries. Videos circulating on social media showed long queues forming on nearby streets as applicants reportedly arrived as early as 2 a.m. to line up for the recruitment exercise. Asamoah said the stampede occurred early in the morning when a large crowd of applicants breached security protocols and forced their way through the stadium gate ahead of the scheduled screening. In Mali, some fuel stations in the capital opened for the first time since an al-Qaeda affiliate imposed a fuel blockade on the West African nation as supply convoys made their way through the landlocked nation while under fire. Schools also managed to open in Bamako for the first time since the JNIM fighters' blockade began 2 weeks ago. According to reports, more than 100 fuel tankers. Recall that on Sunday, the African Union called for urgent international action to combat extremism in Mali. Its statement also condemned the abduction of 3 Egyptian nationals there. Meanwhile, several countries, including France and the United States, have advised their citizens to leave Mali immediately. Tunzil Zuma Samdula, the daughter of former South African President Jacob Zuma, has pleaded not guilty to charges of inciting violence during the devastating riots that took place in July 2021. She appeared before the High Court in Durban for her initial court session. On Monday, prosecutors alleged that her social media post incited others to engage in violent actions, worsening the unrest that engulfed the nation during the tumultuous period. Zuma Samdula has been a prominent figure in South African politics, and her involvement has raised concerns about the declining support for the African National Congress led by her father. The riots were triggered by Jacob Zuma's imprisonment for failing to comply with a corruption inquiry. What began in KwaZulu-Natal rapidly spread to Gauteng, resulting in widespread looting, arson, and a tragic loss of life, with over 300 fatalities and extensive damage to businesses. This trial, attracting significant media attention, places her actions under intense public scrutiny. It also underscores critical issues in South Africa, including high unemployment rates and economic inequality, as well as the influential role of social media in inciting civil disorder. Spotlight Africa brought to you by Spectrum Television. Do well to follow us on social media. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, spectrumtvlive.ng. We've been bringing you stories all around the continent. I am Uyai MM. Enjoy the rest of it. Good afternoon.